Research shows that kneeling ability improves over time. One review found that about 70% of people could kneel at 12 months after knee replacement, and that number increased the longer out from surgery they were. Are you ready to get back to the activities you love after knee replacement? Well, we're here to talk about what really works. The Total Knee Success Podcast is your trusted guide before and after total knee replacement. Here you'll find practical tips and evidence-based strategies, not personal medical advice, just education, all to help you manage pain, rebuild mobility, and get back to living the life you love. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Total Knee Success Podcast. In episode 10, we unpacked the first 5 myths like no pain, no gain, CPM machines, why going downstairs takes more control than going up. And today, we'll keep the momentum going with the next 5 myths 6 through 10. That's a tongue twister. These come up all the time in clinic visits, family conversations, and online groups, and it's easy to see why they stick around. I'll walk you through why these myths don't hold up and share what the research and clinical experience actually show, so you can separate fact from fiction and feel more confident about what really matters. Let's dive right into myth number 6. You'll never kneel again. This is one of the most common worries I hear. Many patients are told, sometimes by friends, family members, or they've learned this from things they've read online, that once you've had a knee replacement, kneeling is simply off limits. The concern is that kneeling might damage the implant or simply won't be possible anymore. That can feel discouraging, especially for people who love gardening, kneeling for prayer, or playing with children and grandchildren and getting down on the floor. So here's what we know. You should not kneel while your incision is fresh. The skin, scar tissue, and nerves around the incision need some time to heal, and putting pressure on them too early can cause irritation and can cause some pain. Once your surgeon confirms that the incision is fully closed and well healed, often around 6 to 8 weeks, gentle kneeling practice on a soft surface can sometimes begin. Research shows that kneeling ability improves over time. One review found that about 70% of people could kneel at 12 months after knee replacement, and that number increased the longer out from surgery they were. The American Academy of Orthopaedic Surgeons also states that kneeling is not harmful, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. Implant manufacturers, including Zimmer Biomet, Stryker, duh-POY Synthes, and Smith & Nephew, do not prohibit kneeling in their education materials, and some even reference activities like gardening as reasonable goals. So why does the myth persist? Mostly because kneeling feels awkward or uncomfortable early on. Scar tissue, incision sensitivity, or numbness, that can make it feel unusual, and that sensation is often misinterpreted as dangerous. Over time with gradual practice, most people find kneeling becomes more comfortable. If kneeling matters to you, talk with your surgeon for the okay and then with your therapist about safe ways to practice once your incision is healed. Generally, you'll be advised to use padding or cushions, start with short bouts, and build your tolerance gradually. Many people regain the ability to kneel with time and with more confidence. Myth number 7. You can start weights and machines right away. Another common belief is that once the initial pain eases, the next step should be heading straight to the gym and using machines to build strength quickly. It feels like a natural choice. Stronger muscles equals better function. But the early phase after knee replacement isn't about heavy lifting. It's about reactivating your quadriceps, controlling swelling, and retraining normal movement. Research-based guidelines from groups like the American Physical Therapy Association and hospital rehabilitation protocols recommend waiting until you have good quadriceps control, a steadier walking pattern, and minimal swelling before adding machine-based strengthening. And this is often around 6 weeks or later, depending on your progress. Why wait? Because starting heavy resistance too early can irritate healing tissues and feed swelling, which can actually make it harder to activate your muscles. Think of it like planting a garden. You water and care for the seedlings first, before piling on heavy fertilizer. If you rush, you risk damaging the very growth you're trying to encourage. In the same way, your knee needs gentle, steady progress before it can handle larger loads. If you'd like to dig deeper in how and why the quadriceps needs special attention after surgery, you can revisit episode 9, where we explore strengthening in a little more detail. Being eager to get strong is a great thing, don't get me wrong. Just put that effort into the right steps at the right time. Bodyweight exercises, sit-to-stands, short step-ups, controlled mini squats. Those are excellent early options that prepare you for heavier resistance later. Myth number 8. You should always use ice and never use heat. This is a really common belief, and it usually comes from the early days after surgery. Ice certainly is emphasized right away, and for good reason. In those first few weeks, swelling is one of the biggest barriers to comfort and motion. Ice, compression, and elevation are the main tools that help bring that swelling down, ease pain, and let the muscles start firing again. But here's the problem with this myth. Many people are told to stick with ice forever, and that heat has no place after a knee replacement. The truth really is more nuanced. Recent research shows that while ice is helpful in the early period, it doesn't carry that same benefit once the swelling has settled. And at that point, heat can actually help with stiffness and mobility. A 2023 meta-analysis compared continuous cryotherapy machines, the devices that circulate chilled water through a wrap placed around the knee for hours at a time, to more traditional ice methods like simple ice packs. It found that there wasn't a major difference between the two in outcomes, such as pain, swelling, or range of motion over time. In other words, both helped in the short term, but neither made a big difference in long-term results. And another study from 2024 reinforced this point, showing that while cold therapy can reduce pain and swelling in the immediate recovery phase, its effect on regaining motion later on is limited. On the other hand, several newer studies are looking closely at heat. For example, a 2024 review noted that heat therapy improves circulation, eases muscle stiffness, and increases tissue flexibility, which makes stretching and motion exercises more comfortable. A lab-based study in 2022 actually tested local heat and found that it improved range of motion and decreased stiffness compared to a placebo treatment. And in broader musculoskeletal research, heat has been shown to help patients stick with their therapy and reduce discomfort, especially when paired with exercise programs. So how do we make sense of this? Instead of thinking of ice and heat as opposites, where one is right and the other is wrong, it's probably better to think about timing. In the early phase, the first 4 to 6 weeks, or as long as swelling is still a big issue, ice is the clear winner. But as time goes on and swelling becomes less of a daily problem, that's when you can begin to introduce gentle heat, especially before stretching or therapy sessions, to help loosen up the knee. Here's a way to picture it. It might sound like a weird analogy at first, but it actually makes sense. Think of your knee as a sponge full of water. In the early stage, when the swelling is high, ice works like squeezing that sponge. It helps push the extra fluid out. But once the sponge isn't soaked anymore, squeezing harder doesn't change much. That's the point when a little warmth can make the sponge softer and more flexible, which allows it to bend and move more easily. So the myth that you should always use ice and never heat doesn't match what the most recent research shows. Ice is critical in the beginning, but as you move further out and stiffness takes center stage, then heat can be a safe and useful tool. The key is to use each at the right time. Ice when swelling dominates, and heat when stiffness is the bigger barrier. Myth number 9. The treadmill should be the go-to early cardio after knee replacement. A lot of people assume that once it's safe to walk, the treadmill is the natural next step. It seems logical. You can set your speed, the surface is flat, and you're indoors where the environment is predictable. Many people have used treadmills before surgery or see them in the therapy gym, so it feels like a default choice for cardio after knee replacement. But here's the issue. In the early phase, most people still have an uneven walking pattern. You might be favoring one leg, taking shorter steps on the surgical side, or shifting your weight to avoid discomfort. If you bring that asymmetry onto the treadmill, the repetitive motion can actually lock in those compensations. Over time, that makes it harder to retrain normal walking. Research shows that even subtle asymmetries, like shorter stride length or less time spent on the surgical leg, can affect long-term gait quality and increases stress on other joints, like the hips or lower back. The treadmill itself adds another challenge. Because the belt moves underneath you, it requires slightly different muscle control than walking on solid ground. Your hamstrings and calf muscles in particular have to adapt to the belt's pull. And if your quadriceps and glutes aren't fully ready, it can put extra strain on tissues that are still healing. For someone with lingering swelling, weakness, or balance concerns, that added stress can make things worse instead of better. And that's why many guidelines recommend starting cardio on a stationary bike instead. The bike gives you smooth, controlled, and symmetrical motion without impact. Even if you can't make a full revolution at first, rocking back and forth builds motion safely. As your strength improves and your gait evens out, you can gradually transition to longer walking sessions on solid ground. Then, once your stride is ready and your balance is reliable, the treadmill can be a useful tool again. So the treadmill isn't bad, it just comes later. Early on, the focus should be regaining symmetry, strength, and confidence in your walking. Once these pieces are in place, the treadmill can add endurance safely without risking poor movement patterns. So give it a try. Try using that stationary bike first. Maybe move to a seated stepping exercise or an elliptical type exercise before returning to your treadmill workouts. Myth number 10, last but not least. Any swelling means something's wrong. This one can create a lot of anxiety. Swelling is one of the first things people notice after surgery, and it can feel dramatic. The knee looks bigger, feels tight, and sometimes even throbs. It's natural to assume that swelling means something is wrong, but that's not always the case. Here's the reality. After a knee replacement, swelling is extremely common. In fact, most people experience some level of it for weeks to months, especially after activity. The key isn't whether swelling is there, it's how it behaves over time. Normal swelling tends to increase when you're active and then settle down with rest, elevation, and ice. And that's your knee's way of saying you've pushed me, maybe sometimes a little too far, and I need a break. It's a normal response, not necessarily a danger sign. Research backs this up. Clinical guidelines note that swelling is part of the healing process, especially in the first several months. And what matters most is the trend, whether it's staying the same, improving, or suddenly getting worse. Studies also show that mild to moderate swelling doesn't prevent good long-term outcomes, as long as it's managed and doesn't progress with concerning symptoms. It's also important to know what's realistic. For many people, swelling can linger for 3 to 6 months, and sometimes even longer after more activity-heavy days. That doesn't necessarily mean something is wrong. It just reflects how long tissues take to heal. If you'd like to hear more about how swelling and pain connect, go back and take a listen to episode 1, where we laid out the foundation for understanding both in the early weeks. Where swelling does become a red flag is when it keeps increasing day after day, or when it comes with other warning signs. For example, redness, warmth, drainage from the incision, fever, or sharp calf pain. Those are signals to call your surgeon right away, because they could mean infection or a blood clot, things that really need immediate attention. So the myth that any swelling means something is wrong doesn't line up with what we know. Some swelling is normal, and in fact, almost universal. What matters most is recognizing which swelling patterns are safe and which ones need medical attention. So, if you ever notice sharp pain that doesn't settle, redness or warmth with fever, drainage from the incision, severe calf pain or swelling, or a sudden loss of motion you had before, these are always reasons to call your surgeon promptly. And that covers the next 5 myths: kneeling, gym machines, ice versus heat, the treadmill, and swelling. Combined with episode 10, we've now tackled the top 10 myths people hear after knee replacement. And I hope you feel more confident separating fact from fiction. In episode 12, we'll switch gears and focus on breathing techniques for stress and pain relief. I'll guide you through simple methods like box breathing and the physiological sigh, both of which help activate the parasympathetic nervous system. That's your body's natural rest and restore mode. These are powerful tools you can use anytime, and you'll even be able to practice them right along with me. This podcast is for educational purposes only. Visit TotalKneeSuccess.com for more resources. Follow the show and share it with a friend. Your total knee success is already in motion.